For years, cruiser prices have been climbing higher and higher, bigger engines, heavier bikes, and payments that make a lot of riders stop and think twice. Somewhere along the way, the affordable cruiser almost disappeared. But in 2026, one motorcycle is starting to change that conversation. It is not the biggest cruiser on the road. It is not the most powerful either. But it might be the cheapest cruiser that still delivers the real riding experience people want. And the strange part is, the more riders look at it, the more they start realizing this might be the bike the cruiser market has been missing. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you may see why riders across the country are suddenly paying attention to it. What's happening? Something strange has been happening in the cruiser world, and riders who have been around long enough can feel it. There was a time when cruisers were not built to impress investors or win spec sheet battles. They were built to ride. A rider could walk into a dealership, pick a bike that looked right, sounded right, and carried enough comfort for long miles on the highway. The purchase felt simple and practical, not something that required months of planning or complicated financing. Those machines were not perfect, but they were attainable. Riders bought them, rode them for years, and still felt like the bike truly belonged to them. Fast forward to 2026, and the landscape looks very different. Cruiser motorcycles have grown larger, heavier, and far more expensive than they used to be. Walk into a modern dealership, and you will see rows of impressive machines with polished paint, massive engines, and technology systems that look more like aircraft dashboards than motorcycle instruments. These bikes are beautiful, no doubt about it, but they also carry price tags that would have seemed unbelievable not so long ago. From that growing question, another realization slowly begins to take shape. Why riders started looking for simpler bikes. Again. For many years, the motorcycle industry believed that bigger always meant better. Manufacturers chased horsepower numbers, larger engines, and increasingly sophisticated technology systems. New cruisers arrived with traction control, ride modes, electronic dashboards, and long lists of features designed to impress buyers scanning specification sheets. In many ways, this approach made sense from a marketing perspective. Technology sells, powerful engines create headlines. New features give manufacturers something exciting to announce every year. Yet, the reality of everyday riding rarely matches the promises printed in glossy brochures. Spend time talking with riders who have been putting miles on motorcycles for decades, and you will hear a different kind of conversation. Many of them remember when bikes were simpler machines. Turn the key, hit the starter, and the engine settled into a rhythm that felt alive and familiar. There were fewer electronics between the rider and the road. Maintenance was straightforward. If something went wrong, it could often be fixed with a basic set of tools and a little mechanical patience. Those riders are not rejecting progress. They appreciate reliability, improvements, and sensible technology, just like anyone else. What they are questioning is whether every motorcycle really needs layers of electronics and increasingly complicated systems. Many riders have started wondering whether the industry may have gone too far in chasing features instead of focusing on the fundamentals that made motorcycles enjoyable in the first place. A different name was beginning to appear in conversations riders were having across dealerships and forums: the motorcycle that quietly entered the conversation. Over the last few years, one particular motorcycle has been appearing more frequently in discussions among riders searching for a sensible cruiser. It is not the fastest bike in the segment. It does not dominate performance charts or headline motorcycle magazines with extreme horsepower numbers. In fact, many riders initially overlooked it entirely because it seemed too modest to compete with the giants of the cruiser world. Yet something interesting began happening once people actually started paying attention to it. Riders who spent time around dealerships noticed more conversations about this small cruiser. Online forums began mentioning it more often. Riders who had spent years on larger machines started asking quiet questions about what it was like to ride. The motorcycle drawing that curiosity was the Royal Enfield Meteor 350. What made this situation unusual was the reason riders were talking about it. Nobody claimed the Meteor was the most powerful cruiser available. Nobody argued it was the most technologically advanced machine in the segment. Instead, riders were noticing something else entirely. This motorcycle seemed to solve a problem that had slowly developed in the cruiser market. Understanding that story begins with the company that built it. If you appreciate honest motorcycle insights that respect real riders and real machines, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts below. Why this bike even exists. Royal Enfield approached the Meteor with a philosophy that feels surprisingly rare in the modern motorcycle industry. Instead of designing the bike to dominate specification comparisons, the company focused on building a cruiser that captured the essential feeling riders expect from the category. The goal was not to overwhelm riders with power or technology. The goal was to create a motorcycle that delivered comfort, simplicity, and everyday usability. That idea shaped every decision behind the Meteor. The riding position was designed to feel natural and relaxed. The overall size remained manageable, so riders would feel confident controlling the bike in city traffic or parking lots. The engineering focused on reliability and smooth operation rather than chasing dramatic performance numbers. Every detail pointed toward one simple objective: building a cruiser that people would actually enjoy riding regularly. For many riders, that approach feels refreshingly honest. Instead of presenting itself as a luxury product, the Meteor behaves like a motorcycle meant for real life. It invites riders to take longer routes home, explore quiet roads outside the city, and enjoy the simple rhythm of cruising without worrying about complexity or excessive cost. Before understanding why this cruiser resonates with so many riders, it helps to look closely at how the motorcycle itself was built. Before we move on, take a look at the description for our recommended gear and accessories. Sometimes, the best upgrade for an affordable cruiser is not the bike, but what you add to make it fit your ride. What makes it feel like a cruiser? The moment a rider swings a leg. Over the Royal Enfield Meteor 350, something familiar settles in. The seat sits low enough that both boots meet the pavement with confidence. The foot pegs reach slightly forward, encouraging a relaxed stretch instead of a tight bend. The handlebars rise gently toward the rider's chest, wide enough to guide the bike with calm, steady leverage rather than force. Each of these pieces comes together in a way that feels natural rather than engineered for effect. Riders who have spent years on cruisers immediately recognize the posture. This riding position reflects the core design language that defined the cruiser category for generations. The rider sits in the motorcycle rather than perched on top of it. The spine remains upright. The arms rest comfortably without strain. The overall stance invites long miles without fatigue, building in the shoulders or wrists. When a bike achieves that balance, it feels welcoming from the first moment the engine starts. Many motorcycles attempt to imitate that posture, yet sometimes exaggerate it with extreme forward controls or stretched frames. The Meteor avoids that trap. Instead of pushing the geometry toward dramatic styling, it holds onto a classic layout that riders already trust. The result feels balanced and familiar, especially for riders who remember cruisers from earlier decades. Comfort establishes the connection between rider and machine, yet the engine ultimately defines how that connection feels once the ride begins. The engine philosophy. At the heart of the Meteor sits an engine that follows a very deliberate philosophy. Instead of chasing enormous displacement figures, Royal Enfield built the motorcycle around a 349 cubic centimeter single-cylinder engine designed for smooth and predictable power delivery. The goal was not overwhelming acceleration. The goal was steady confidence in everyday riding. Single-cylinder engines have always held a special place in motorcycle history. They are mechanically simple, easier to maintain, and often surprisingly durable when built correctly. The Meteor's engine continues that tradition while incorporating modern fuel injection and internal balancing to reduce vibration. Riders who start the bike for the first time usually notice how calmly the engine settles into its rhythm. That rhythm matters more than dramatic power numbers. The engine responds in a steady, linear way when the throttle opens. Instead of surging forward with sudden force, the power builds gradually. That behavior makes the bike approachable for newer riders, while remaining satisfying for experienced riders who appreciate mechanical honesty. Understanding the engine reveals the design philosophy, yet the real test of any motorcycle begins once the wheels meet real pavement. How it behaves on real roads. Motorcycle advertisements often highlight maximum horsepower and breathtaking acceleration numbers. Those statistics can be impressive, but they rarely describe the way most people actually ride. The majority of miles happen at normal road speeds, where stability and comfort matter far more than peak performance. A typical ride might involve 40 miles per hour through a quiet town, followed by a stretch of highway cruising near 60 miles per hour. These speeds represent the everyday rhythm of motorcycling. Engineers who designed the Meteor focused specifically on how the bike would behave in those conditions. Out on real roads, the motorcycle feels steady and predictable. The suspension absorbs uneven pavement without drama. The steering responds calmly when the rider guides the bike through gentle curves. Instead of demanding constant attention, the machine encourages a relaxed pace that allows riders to enjoy the scenery passing by. That relaxed behavior becomes especially noticeable on longer rides. Some motorcycles constantly remind the rider of their power and capability. The Meteor takes a quieter approach. It feels content, cruising along without pushing the rider toward unnecessary speed. This character makes the bike particularly appealing for riders who enjoy the journey more than the numbers. Performance may attract attention, yet one final detail explains why the Meteor created such a strong reaction across the cruiser market. Why the price turned heads. When the Meteor appeared in dealerships, one detail immediately captured the attention of riders and industry observers alike. The price stood dramatically lower than many cruisers sharing the same showroom floor. In a segment where costs have steadily climbed upward, that number felt almost surprising. Cruisers with heritage styling, modern fuel injection, and respectable build quality often sit in far higher price brackets. Riders browsing through catalogs or walking through dealerships have grown accustomed to seeing increasingly large figures attached to cruiser motorcycles. Those numbers have quietly pushed some riders away from the segment altogether. The Meteor disrupted that expectation. By arriving with a price thousands lower than many competitors, it reopened the cruiser conversation for riders who had stopped looking. Suddenly, a motorcycle with authentic cruiser styling and practical features was available without the financial pressure many riders feared. That accessibility changed the way people talked about the bike. Instead of debating horsepower or advanced technology, conversations focused on value. Riders began asking whether the Meteor represented a smarter approach to the cruiser idea. Could a smaller, simpler machine actually deliver everything most riders truly need? That realization spread quickly through rider conversations and dealership floors. Once people understood how accessible the bike could be, the cruiser market itself started paying attention in a very different way. What dealers are actually seeing. Dealership floors often reveal shifts in the motorcycle market long before official sales reports confirm them. People who work around motorcycles every day develop a sense for subtle changes in rider behavior. They notice which machines attract attention, which ones sit untouched, and which questions customers ask when they walk through the door. Over the last few seasons, many dealers have started noticing a pattern that feels different from the past decade. Instead of walking straight toward the biggest engines or the most expensive cruisers, more riders are pausing in front of smaller machines first. They study the bikes carefully, ask about price, weight, and maintenance, and spend more time discussing how the motorcycle actually feels to ride. These conversations rarely revolve around horsepower records or high-performance bragging rights. Instead, they focus on practical concerns that experienced riders tend to value most. Many riders simply want a machine they can enjoy without worrying about complicated electronics or overwhelming weight. Some riders mention that they already own large touring bikes and want something easier for everyday rides. Others explain that they are returning to motorcycles after years away and prefer something manageable instead of intimidating. The questions dealers hear most often revolve around comfort, reliability, and overall value rather than extreme performance. Those early signals from showroom floors begin to make more sense once the entire cruiser landscape of 2026 comes into view. The wider cruiser landscape in 2026. The cruiser segment looks far more diverse today than it did a decade earlier. In the past, the category often revolved around a relatively predictable formula built around large engines and traditional styling. While those machines still exist and continue to attract loyal riders, the modern cruiser landscape now includes a much wider range of ideas about what a cruiser can be. Manufacturers across the world have experimented with new interpretations of the cruiser concept. Some companies emphasize performance by building motorcycles that blend cruiser ergonomics with aggressive engines and sport-oriented handling. Others push design boundaries with unusual frames, bold bodywork, and mechanical layouts that challenge traditional expectations. These experiments demonstrate how the cruiser category has expanded beyond its historical definition. One example of this experimentation appears in machines such as the Benda LFC 700, a motorcycle that attracted attention for its unconventional styling and large rear tire. Its design demonstrates how manufacturers are willing to explore bold ideas that depart from classic cruiser shapes. The goal in many cases is to create motorcycles that stand out visually and attract younger riders who might be searching for something different. At the same time, performance-oriented cruisers continue to evolve as well. Motorcycles like the Indian Sport Chief emphasize power, strong acceleration, and aggressive handling characteristics. These machines highlight how some companies believe the cruiser segment should compete directly with sport-oriented motorcycles in terms of capability and performance. Once riders start examining the details more closely, another surprise emerges about what this modest cruiser actually offers. If you enjoy straight, no-nonsense motorcycle stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next breakdown. New videos explore the bikes shaping the future of riding and the machines riders are rediscovering today. Why affordable does not mean basic. One of the most common assumptions riders make when they hear about an inexpensive motorcycle is that it must lack important features or quality components. In many cases, that assumption proves correct, as manufacturers sometimes reduce equipment in order to achieve a lower price. The Meteor challenges that expectation in several ways that riders quickly notice when examining the motorcycle more closely. The engine uses modern fuel injection technology, which improves reliability and efficiency compared with older carbureted systems. Riders benefit from consistent starting behavior and smoother throttle response across a range of temperatures and riding conditions. These characteristics may not generate excitement in advertisements, yet they matter greatly for everyday ownership. The suspension system also reflects thoughtful engineering rather than cost-cutting. Instead of feeling overly stiff or unstable, the suspension provides balanced comfort during normal cruising speeds. Riders who spend time on uneven pavement often appreciate how the motorcycle absorbs small imperfections in the road, rather than transmitting every bump directly to the rider. Another unexpected detail appears in the instrument cluster. The Meteor includes a navigation display that integrates with the main gauge system. While it remains simple compared with large touchscreen systems found on premium motorcycles, it provides useful guidance for riders exploring unfamiliar roads. The design keeps the technology unobtrusive while still offering practical assistance when needed. Gradually, the conversation around cruisers begins turning toward a larger realization about what riders truly want from their machines. The return of the honest motorcycle. Over the past several decades, motorcycles across many segments have become increasingly complex. Manufacturers competed by adding more electronics, more adjustable settings, and more performance-focused features. Each new generation of machines promised greater capability and sophistication than the one before it. For many riders, those innovations brought genuine improvements in safety and performance. However, complexity also introduced new concerns. More electronics meant more systems that could fail. Additional technology increased purchase prices and sometimes complicated routine, maintenance. Riders who once appreciated mechanical simplicity began feeling overwhelmed by the growing layers of digital control. In response, a quiet cultural shift has started to appear among experienced riders. Instead of chasing the latest technology, many people are rediscovering the appeal of motorcycles that simply perform their core tasks well. They want machines that start easily, cruise comfortably, and provide predictable handling without requiring constant adjustment. A comfortable seat becomes more valuable than advanced rider modes. Balanced handling becomes more appealing than extreme performance numbers. Riders who spend long hours on the road often realize that enjoyment comes from consistency and reliability rather than technical complexity. And once that realization spreads across the community, it begins shaping how riders think about the future of the cruiser market, what it means for new riders. For many years, entering the cruiser world followed a fairly predictable path. A rider would find a manageable motorcycle, spend time learning the fundamentals of balance and throttle control, and gradually build confidence mile after mile. Cruisers often served as the doorway into motorcycling because their riding posture felt comfortable and their engines delivered smooth, approachable power. That formula worked well for generations of riders who discovered the freedom of the open road through machines that welcomed them rather than intimidated them. Over time, however, the rising cost of many cruisers made that traditional entry point harder to reach. New riders walking into dealerships sometimes found themselves facing motorcycles that felt financially overwhelming. Even when those machines were beautifully built, the price tags created hesitation. Riders who simply wanted to begin their journey suddenly had to think about long-term payments instead of focusing on learning the craft of riding. Motorcycles such as the Royal Enfield Meteor 350 help reopen that doorway by offering a cruiser that feels approachable in both size and cost. The bike allows new riders to step into the culture without feeling pressured by financial strain. It becomes possible again to start small, learn patiently, and gradually build experience over time. Yet, the significance of this small cruiser extends well beyond riders just beginning their journey. Why experienced riders are looking at lighter cruisers. Riding priorities tend to evolve as the years pass and miles accumulate. Riders who have spent decades in the saddle often develop a clearer understanding of what truly matters during long days on the road. Early in a riding career, power and performance may feel exciting and essential. Over time, however, comfort and practicality often become far more valuable. A lighter motorcycle can transform everyday riding in ways that larger machines sometimes cannot. Maneuvering through traffic becomes less stressful. Parking lot turns feel easier to manage. Long rides require less physical effort because the motorcycle responds naturally instead of demanding constant strength and concentration. Many experienced riders eventually discover that enjoyment does not always come from the largest engine available. Instead, it often comes from a motorcycle that feels balanced and predictable. A machine that encourages relaxed cruising can restore the simple pleasure of riding without the weight and complexity that accompany some modern cruisers. Motorcycles like the Royal Enfield Meteor 350 fit perfectly into this evolving mindset. Their manageable size and straightforward engineering make them appealing to riders who have already experienced the extremes of the cruiser segment. After years spent riding heavy touring machines or high-powered cruisers, some riders begin looking for motorcycles that emphasize ease rather than intensity. As riders across different generations start noticing this change, the industry itself begins paying closer attention. How manufacturers might respond. Motorcycle manufacturers constantly watch the market for signals that rider preferences are changing. Dealership conversations, sales trends, and rider discussions all provide clues about where the industry may be heading. When patterns begin appearing across multiple regions and rider groups, companies recognize that something important may be unfolding. The growing interest in accessible cruisers could encourage manufacturers to reconsider how they approach the segment. For years, many brands focused heavily on larger engines and premium motorcycles because those machines offered strong profit margins and powerful brand images. While that strategy produced impressive motorcycles, it also left fewer options for riders seeking affordability. If motorcycles like the Royal Enfield Meteor 350 continue attracting attention, other companies may start exploring similar ideas. Manufacturers could revisit smaller engine platforms or develop cruisers designed specifically for everyday practicality. The goal would not be to abandon large motorcycles, but to restore balance within the cruiser lineup. Such a shift would benefit riders in several ways. Greater competition often leads to more choices and improved value. When multiple brands begin offering accessible cruisers, riders gain the freedom to select machines that suit their needs without feeling restricted to expensive options. Looking at the bigger picture reveals why one modest cruiser may have already begun reshaping expectations across the entire segment. The cruiser that reset expectations. For many years, the cruiser market followed a predictable path. Each new generation of motorcycles seemed to grow larger, heavier, and more expensive than the one before it. Bigger engines promised greater performance. Additional technology promised advanced capability. Higher prices reinforced the idea that cruisers belonged among premium machines. That pattern appeared almost inevitable until a smaller motorcycle challenged the assumption. The Royal Enfield Meteor 350 arrived without enormous power figures or extravagant technology. Instead, it focused on delivering the fundamental experience riders expect from a cruiser: comfort, stability, and the quiet satisfaction of riding a machine that feels honest. By doing so, the Meteor reminded riders of something the industry occasionally forgets. Motorcycling has never been defined solely by performance numbers or elaborate features. The heart of the experience lies in the connection between rider, machine, and road. When a motorcycle encourages riders to explore without hesitation, it fulfills that purpose beautifully. Riders begin taking longer routes home, venturing down unfamiliar back roads, and rediscovering the calm rhythm that makes cruising so appealing. Those moments matter far more than any specification printed in a brochure. Cruiser. Motorcycles have never really been about the biggest engine or the most expensive badge. They have always been about the feeling of the ride, the rhythm of the road, and a machine that makes you want to keep going just a little farther. And sometimes the bike that reminds riders of that truth is not the biggest one in the showroom, but the one that simply gets the basics right. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts below. Would you ride this cruiser in 2026, or would you choose something different?